History is far more complicated than we'd like to believe. Even today, in classrooms around the world, students are taught different versions of the same events, depending on where they live and how that history shaped their nation. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past, right? Thankfully, we also have archaeology, a field that sometimes helps us uncover the truth, regardless of what was written down centuries ago. And every now and then, one of those discoveries flips our entire understanding of the past upside down. Let's take a look at the 15 most amazing archaeological finds that changed history. Number quince, ancient fast food. We usually assume that fast food is a modern invention, and that makes sense, right? The world moves faster now, so naturally the food has to keep up. Britain's first fish and chip shops popped up in the 1860s. By the 1950s, drive-thrus exploded in the US, and the rest, well, you know that story. But grabbing a quick bite and rushing off isn't a new concept at all. It's ancient, and you can just GPT it. Back in the Greco-Roman world, there was something called a thermopolium, literally a place where something hot is sold. These street-facing food stalls were everywhere in bigger towns and cities, often selling just a few simple dishes: spiced wine, meats, lentils, or cheese. Like today, there were no tables or menus, just a counter and large embedded jars called dolia to hold the food. They mainly catered to those without kitchens, slaves, workers, or the poor. And yes, these places had a reputation. Roman playwright Plautus even said they were full of effeminate Greeks and thieving slaves. Still, a few were fancy tables, frescoes, and all. The best preserved one is the Thermopolium of Asalina in Pompeii. Number 14. War is older than we thought. Well, for a long time we believed war came into existence only when civilization did. Before agriculture, people may have squabbled, sure, but actual war, that supposedly came later. After all, the part of the brain that drives us toward hate, dominance, and violence, the reptilian brain, has existed in humans for more than 10,000 years. But in theory, small population sizes and survival-based living meant conflict rarely escalated beyond individual murder or minor disputes. That's why a discovery in 2012 near Lake Turkana, Kenya, turned everything on its head. Archaeologists found 27 human skeletons dated between 9,500 and 10,500 years ago. Men, women, and even children, members of a semi-nomadic tribe, all brutally killed. Blunt trauma, weapon wounds. One woman had shattered knees and bound hands at the time of death. This wasn't a fight, it was a massacre. And it predates agriculture in that region. No one knows exactly who attacked them or why, but it shows that organized violence existed far earlier than we thought. Nothing else this old has ever revealed such a scale of deliberate, deadly conflict. Number 13. Europeans and America. Columbus didn't discover America, and we've moved past pretending he did. And again, if you don't believe GPT, Leif Erikson, the Icelandic Viking, made it to North America centuries earlier, blown off course on a trip to Greenland. His travels are even documented in the saga of the Greenlanders, but there's something even more radical. Evidence suggests Europeans reached America long before either of them. Archaeologists have found dozens of ancient stone tools across 6 sites on the East Coast: Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and one even dragged up 60 miles offshore by a scallop trawler. The kicker? These tools match those made by the prehistoric Solutrean culture of France and Spain, and they're old, like 19,000 to 26,000 years old. One of the blades tested chemically, its origin can be traced back to France. Back then, sea levels were lower due to the Ice Age. Just like the first Native Americans crossed a land bridge from Asia, Solutreans may have island-hopped across a now submerged Atlantic route. Even an 8,000-year-old skeleton in Florida showed strong European genetic markers. This means that Europeans might have reached America before Europe was even called Europe. Number 12. Australians and America. Another twist in the who got here first debate comes from Brazil, and it doesn't involve Vikings or Solutreans. It's about Australians, or at least people with Australian and Melanesian skull features. Several human remains discovered there, along with 33 more in Baja California, bear traits not found in later Native Americans. Charcoal and stone tools found at the site suggest habitation stretching back nearly 50,000 years. The theory, these people crossed the Pacific by boat, sounds wild, but ancient cave paintings in Australia actually depict boats built for ocean travel. And in 1947, Thor Heyerdahl proved it was possible by crossing the ocean on a simple raft made of balsa wood. At some point, these early settlers vanished, most likely replaced or outnumbered by Asians crossing via the Bering Land Bridge. From about 9,000 to 7,000 years ago, skull shapes in the archaeological record shifted from Australoid to Mongoloid. Still, remnants may exist. People living in Tierra del Fuego, South America's southern tip, carry skull traits from both groups. If this holds, then native Australians might have been America's true first settlers. Number 1. Ancient Chinese civilization in America. This discovery made in the American Southwest suggests that Chinese explorers may have reached the continent long before Columbus ever set sail. Carvings resembling Chinese characters were found in the remote mountains of the Nevada desert, specifically in the area known as the Inyo County script. These strange symbols match certain forms of early Chinese writing, particularly from the Shang dynasty, which dates back more than 3,000 years. The resemblance is not superficial. Several symbols are almost identical in form and meaning. Some scholars argue the similarities could just be coincidental, but others believe ancient Chinese explorers, possibly seafaring traders, might have made contact with the western coast of North America via long Pacific voyages. There are even legends in Chinese historical texts that speak of distant eastern lands filled with strange plants and tall mountains, aligning eerily with descriptions of the Americas. While still controversial, many believe it is actual thing. Number 10. The Cathedral of Old Dongola. The landscape of Old Dongola in Sudan is dry, broken, and still. But under its dust, echoes of something massive waited quietly. In July 2021, a discovery was made that changed everything we thought we knew about the Nubian Christian kingdom of Makuria. Archaeologists found what appears to be the largest church structure ever unearthed in the region. More than a church, it may well have been a cathedral. Two of its walls still stood, decorated with portraits of the 12 apostles, faded but unmistakably human. A domed tomb sat within, unopened, possibly housing the remains of a high-ranking bishop. For centuries, the story of Christianity in this part of Africa had gone undertold, overshadowed by later Islamic histories. But this building, grand in scale and ambition, suggests something very different. That Makuria was a spiritual hub, that Old Dongola rivaled medieval European cities in scale. This wasn't just a footnote in African history. It was a centerpiece left out of the story until someone finally dug deep enough. Number 9. The appearance of agriculture. The rise of farming has long been anchored to the Fertile Crescent, a cradle of early civilization stretching through parts of the modern Middle East. That part still holds, but how it all unfolded turns out to be more fractured and more fascinating. New archaeological and genetic findings suggest that agriculture didn't emerge from a single unified culture, but rather from two isolated hubs, one in the southern Levant and the other in the Zagros Mountains of western Iran. Both communities were developing agricultural practices separately, domesticating different animals and cultivating different plants, completely unaware of each other. For thousands of years, they lived apart until obsidian trade routes finally brought them into contact in eastern Turkey. What followed was a quiet exchange, not of conquest but of knowledge. Their ideas mixed, reshaped, and spread. Those from the Levant moved toward East Africa through the Nile corridor. Meanwhile, the Zagros farmers pushed east into the steppes, influencing what would become India and Pakistan. One region, two beginnings. With that, a more complex origin of civilization quietly surfaced from the soil. Number 8. The gold crucifix of Denmark. What began as a casual walk with a metal detector turned into a quiet challenge to centuries of historical assumptions. In 2016, just outside the Danish town of Anslev, an amateur treasure hunter uncovered something small, brilliant, and profoundly disruptive: a gold crucifix buried beneath farmland. The artifact, delicately crafted with gold thread and filigree, was eventually dated to between 900 and 950 AD. That one detail shifted everything. Until then, the gelling stones, erected in 965 AD to honor King Harald Bluetooth's conversion of the Danes, were seen as the earliest Christian symbols in Denmark. But this tiny cross predates that by a generation or more. It doesn't erase the importance of Harald, but it complicates his legacy. Christianity didn't arrive with his decree. It had already begun to trickle through the land, quietly, personally, before kings made it official. The crucifix is less a declaration and more a whisper from someone who believed before belief was royal policy. And in that whisper lies a fuller, older version of Denmark's Christian roots. Number set: Portuguese swivel gun in Australia. It was just a rusted cannon, half buried in the soil near Darwin. At least, that's what it looked like when a 13-year-old stumbled upon it in 2012. But under the weight of centuries, that forgotten object spoke louder than history books ever could. This wasn't British or Dutch. It was Portuguese. A swivel gun from the 16th century, the kind mounted on exploratory ships that sailed beyond known maps. And it didn't just land in Australia, it stayed. That alone challenges the long-standing belief that European contact began with the Dutch in the 1600s. The existence of this weapon suggests that someone else got here first. Whether the Portuguese left more behind or if this gun was just a lonely remnant of a failed voyage remains unclear. Still, the artifact stands as quiet evidence that maritime history around this continent is older and far more tangled than we assumed. Some discoveries shout. This one merely rested in the dirt, waiting for someone to notice it was never supposed to be there. What do you think about it? Number 6. The Ming Dynasty Buddha figurine. Out in the sun-scorched stretches of Western Australia, two filmmakers looking for French artifacts stumbled on something far stranger, something that didn't belong. A 6-inch bronze Buddha, crafted in unmistakable Ming Dynasty style, lay half-buried beside a remote roadside. No one knows how it got there. No shipping manifest, no colonial archive, and no record of Chinese travelers in that area during that era. But the statue, confirmed by experts to be authentic, forces that uncertainty into the light. Could Chinese explorers have reached the Australian coast in the 1400s? The statue suggests it's possible. Ming China had fleets, ambitions, and trade networks that stretched wide across the Pacific. Maybe one reached farther than we realized. What began as a search for a French relic became a puzzle that no one had expected. The bronze figure isn't just an object, it's a loose thread. Tug at it, and the tapestry of Australia's early history begins to warp, twist, and reveal gaps we never thought to look for before. Number 5. Ancient Gandharan Buddhist scrolls. Buried beneath centuries of dust and silence, the scrolls that surfaced from the Gandharan region weren't just relics, they were voices long lost to time. Written between the 1st and 3rd centuries BCE, these fragile manuscripts held within them the teachings of an ancient Buddhist school. Dharmapada verses, the Rhinoceros Sutra, wisdom that had traveled through minds and mouths for generations before ever touching ink. And now, in a 2022 breakthrough, those voices were digitized, unrolled, and finally allowed to breathe again. Found near what is now northwestern Pakistan and eastern Afghanistan, the scrolls revealed not only familiar teachings, but also passages previously unknown. That part matters, because it suggests the version of Buddhism we've come to accept may not be the full story. As scholars decode more of the text, they're finding clues about how oral and written traditions overlapped, evolved, and sometimes contradicted each other. A rediscovered doorway into the intellectual crossroads of ancient Asia quietly waiting in a library in Washington, D.C. Alright guys, now let's head over to Japan. Number 4. Hidden Ancestors of Japan. Until recently, Japan's story had two threads: hunter-gatherers of the Jomon period and rice-farming migrants from the Yayoi era. That was the clean version, the neat one you'd find in school books. But science rarely stays clean for long. In 2021, a genetic study turned the timeline sideways. A third group emerged, unaccounted for, unexpected, genetically distinct. Migrants from East Asia, possibly Han Chinese, arrived during the Kofun period, around 2,000 years ago. Their DNA showed up in the remains of 12 individuals across Japan. It didn't match either of the known groups. That changes everything. Not because history is wrong, but because it was never finished. This third wave reshapes the narrative of Japan's formation, its bloodlines, its cultures, and its evolution. Some in Japan weren't thrilled. The idea that the nation's ancestry might be more mixed than imagined struck a nerve, but bones don't lie. Number 3. The oldest writing in the world. Back in 1961, 3 clay tablets were pulled from a burial pit in modern-day Romania. They weren't large, barely palm-sized, but what they carried might rewrite everything we thought we knew about written history. Etched with strange symbols and buried alongside bones and ritual objects, these Tartaria tablets could predate Mesopotamian writing by over 1,000 years. Some say the markings are just decoration. Others see the beginning of a lost script. More tablets have surfaced since, similar signs, same region. The debate hasn't cooled. But one thing's clear: if they're real writing, history didn't begin in the Fertile Crescent. It started here. Number 2. The Doric Temple within a temple. For years, the ruins in Payent, Italy, whispered through stone, mostly ignored beyond their postcard perfection. But in 2019, while restoring a small Doric temple, archaeologists stumbled upon something unexpected. Inside those ancient walls, a smaller, older sanctuary had been hiding in plain sight. A temple within a temple, decorated with lion-headed dripstones, painted terracotta, and ritual altars carved with blood grooves, gorgons, bullheads, and a depiction of Eos riding a dolphin, myth and worship fused in physical form. The analysis pointed to the early 5th century BCE, predating some of the city's most celebrated monuments. It was more than a structure. It was evidence that the city's earliest colonists weren't just replicating Greek architecture, they were creating their own, challenging the idea that early Italian Greek colonies lived in the shadow of their homeland. They had autonomy, artistry, ambition. The discovery peeled back the layers of cultural influence and revealed a people with their own vision of what the divine should look like, feel like, and be remembered as. Number 1. The Tartessian stone busts. In April 2023, southwest Spain gave up a secret it had held for over 2 millennia. Not treasure, not gold, something quieter but far more disruptive. 5 carved stone busts buried in the ruins of an ancient Tartessian building. The Tartessians have always hovered somewhere between legend and archaeology, rumored to be warriors, traders, and fabulists of gold. But they weren't supposed to be sculptors, at least that's what we thought. Until now, their culture was considered non-iconic, meaning they didn't make images of people. That idea collapsed the moment the busts were uncovered. These weren't crude or symbolic. They were detailed, human, lifelike. They sat within a 2-story structure that once served as a political and economic hub. Maybe that's why they were buried, to protect them when everything else crumbled. What they reveal is a civilization far more sophisticated than assumed. Not just fighters or merchants, but artists who chisel legacy into stone. And just like that, Tartessios shifted from myth to something real enough to look back at you. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon in the next one.